Welcome to the 66th episode of the interview series, a production of One Week Critique, which is an Iowa-based arts and education nonprofit that offers educational resources and editorial support to students and teachers of the literary arts. You can learn more about us and our programs or support our work by visiting our website, oneweekcritique.com. That's the number oneweekcritique.com. Please like and subscribe to help us continue producing excellent content. I'm Jon Riccio, joined by Josh Medsker, a New Jersey teacher and writer originally from Alaska. That's really cool. I think you might be well, we've had one other Alaska person on here that I know of. So maybe
Really?
just maybe a handful or two or three Alaskans so far
I,
on
I
One Week
might know
Critique.
them.
Joe Holtz, he teaches at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Nope, don't know
Uh,
them.
we'll probably end up talking about Alaska in one of these questions.
Undoubtedly.
Josh is the author of the collections Cacophony and Park and the chapbook 10 Crass Poems, each published by Alien Buddha Press. In 2020, Cacophony received an Elgin Award nomination for full-length science fiction and fantasy poetry book. Today, we'll be discussing Josh's second collection, Park. Got it here. Which editor-in-chief of the Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics, fourth edition, Roland Green calls an exquisitely rendered book of poems about a place, reminding us how poetry's past remains available in the present. Josh's website is joshmedsker.com. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Can't wait to talk about Park and some of the ideas that it gave me in terms of place-based writing and observational poetics. And I read with an eye towards craft takeaways. And I've done my third reread of Park, so many craft takeaways that are just literally on the eye sockets right here. So Park didn't disappoint in that area. I was thrilled by every time I found myself annotating in the margins, talk to Josh about this, or what could I learn as a writer by this incorporation of a new craft technique here and what he's doing in terms of contrasts and all of these, which are just bubbling below the surface of this little interview script. But what I love at the very outset is how the third section of Park contrasts a country with a berry, withered and nearly dried, while the opening of section 5 consists of a boot print under a bird print. So we have that gigantic image of a country, and then you're just comparing it to that little teeny tiny berry. And then I am just a stickler for the boot prints and the bird print. So my first question is, what role does scale play in your collection?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about that. Um, it, it was hard for me to articulate, but I guess the best way I can describe it is trying to capture two feelings at once. You know, so taking the how did I write it? The Italian alder. Yeah, the Italian alder likely brought in family tradition from the old country, and the berry, withered and nearly dried, shakes as a big bug bites it. Do I hear it sigh? A small berry sigh. Um, contrasting with the the infinitesimal descriptions, like just getting the absolute smallest image that you can, and then in the same poem having a reference to an Italian alder, right? So trying to capture both of those experiences at the same time. That's kind of what I was going for. And it when you used that word scale, I started thinking about it and I was like, shit, like I kind of did that all over the place, but I didn't really think about it in that term.
Yeah. But I do like the simultaneity of how both of these contrasting sizes can exist within the section of a poem, this larger collection here. And, one of the writers that brought us together was Rogan Kelly, who is
Hmm.
one of the people that blurbed your book. And we also have book blurbs by Irene Toe and Sarah Nichols and Laura Page. And then I'm going back to what Roland Green wrote, and there's this comparison of Park to the poets Dickinson, Williams, and Cummings. I'm going to add another figure, and that's Bernadette Mayer and her collection Midwinter Day.
Yeah, I bought that, by the way. I'm enjoying it.
Great. Now, this Midwinter Day takes place, as we're told, on December 22nd, 1978, at 100 Main Street in Lenox, Massachusetts. Mayer's work begins. Stately, you came to town in my opening dream. Lately, you've been showing up a lot. I saw clearly you were staying in the mirror with me. You walk in, the hills are green. I keep you warm. Midwinter Day, it's 6 sections. It spans 119 pages. Park is 84 sections. It runs 91 pages. And it begins long ago. Beyond 7 mountains and 7 forests, I cross the vaulted arch onto the path, a dream. Midwinter Day is densely constructed. When I read it, I experience it as an hourly dissertation, whereas Park pestles the sparseness. In section 8, the leaves blew from over there near that live oak, tiny little claw marks, a crisscrossing DNA letter, a 5-piece beard of squirrels rushes down the back face of the tree. This facet of one observation pollinating another encapsulates Park's pivots. Another example is when we're in section 9, and there's that phrase, smooth deer antler, and it preludes a smiling hulk of an old man. And what just occurred to me is we talked earlier about scale, and here you have this, again, this smooth deer antler. I guess I'm pointing to my curls this morning. And then the hulk of an old man. Did you envision your book as a day-long sensorial event in the vein of Bernadette Mayer? Or was it more along the lines of a gathering of excursions?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I- if I'm understanding your question correctly, it's not one day. Like you wouldn't say, oh, section one, like number one is sorry. So going through the vaulted arch, um, that was literally me like walking through the arch of the park. But then like each of these little sections it's not don't feel like I'm explaining myself very well. It's more of a uh like a brain fart. I'm so sorry. Um it's not I don't want to tell you how to consume it, but like I didn't envision it as like a day-long excursion so much as like little like you could kind of pop in at any point and get a sensation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that approach. And what's interesting for me to build off of that idea, Josh, is there are times when I've sat with Park and I get through about half of it, then I go and I would grade maybe some final papers, and then I would come back and finish it, and or I would take it and annotate it and read it for the sake of, okay, I'm coming up with some questions for Josh. But then this morning, I just sat down right here in this comfortable blue chair and I from cover to cover. I read the blurbs first, and then of course, I read the opening copy, the opening excerpts, and then, one of my habits is that I time myself when I read, and I think it goes back to my musician days, and we'll talk about music later on, but I would practice with an alarm clock, and I later scaled it down to something around the size of this, but I would set it for an hour and 5 minutes to then just, and there would be 5 minutes of really bad notes, friends interrupting me to watch their instruments if they took a bathroom break, or
Hmm.
heaven forbid, a cigarette smoking break. This was the 90s.
Hmm.
And I would say, okay, that hour and 5 minutes translates to roughly 1 hour of solid time of my viola and me. And yeah, there were a few interruptions, but it counts as an hour. And so I set my timer this morning for about 64 minutes, thinking, okay, it would probably will take me an hour to just make my way through the book. And so it stopped at 12:58, meaning if I had, hit the little play at 64:00, then put it down and started reading, all told, I'm saying about maybe a 52 or 54-minute experience of just sitting down and being with the text. And it honestly, it felt like no time had passed. And
Oh,
there's
wow.
it was just, whereas, and I've read Bernadette Mayer. I've never done her Midwinter Day in one fell swoop. I always take a break. I mean, at most, it's kind of like, okay, a 2 or 3 day read for me if I go in these increments. But
Well,
again,
and that's
mhm,
yeah, well, and that like now that we're talking about it, that actually brings up a really interesting point for me, right? So I was like, oh, like I'm not going to tell you how to consume the work. For me, like when I read poetry, so perfect example, like I'm sitting here next to, can you see it? So my bookshelf, right?
yeah,
Those are poetry books. So what I do is like I'll go off into the kitchen, like making dinner or whatever. And if I'm waiting for, the meat to brown or the butter to melt, I'll go in and I'll read a poem. But it can only be one or two poems. And then I just go back and do my thing, right? Or like perfect example, popcorn. Right? We have popcorn. I'm waiting for it to pop. I go and I read a couple of, poems, and then it beeps, and I go back to do my thing. So that's what kind of threw me about your question, because I don't think like that. Like I don't sit down and read a whole book of poetry cover to cover. Like it just wouldn't even occur to me. So right. So like when I'm writing it, I don't think about it either. It just kind of when the time came to assemble the thing,
mhm.
it didn't matter if I'd written it. Well, first, so let me go back. So I started it in the summer of 2020 and finished it, I guess, like a year and a half later. But what I was trying to get out with the vaulted arch thing, like that was the very first thing that I wrote. So I
Mm,
knew that had to be first. But after that, all bets were off, right? Like it didn't have to go in any particular order, and it didn't have to be. And I think I mentioned this to you in an email. It didn't like like Bernadette Myers was Midwinter Day, but this was like, okay, this thing with the beard of squirrels, that was in the spring. But then the section that comes right after that was the winter, and then right after that's the summer. So it's just like a free for all, because it was all about like capturing that experience and then weaving it together in an interesting way. Like if you wanted to read two or three poems at a clip, it will be a good, interesting thing for you. But you could also just read one, and that might be enough.
that's interesting. I do. So I see more of the process. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And, when you talk about reading in increments, so for me, I read sometimes as two different Johns. I mean, not that there are five Jon Riccios just floating out there in maybe in the cover letter universe, but sometimes I'll read it just as John, who's all about poetry and the utopia that you can arrive at through one stanza at a time as your sort of travel log. But then I also will have this time when I just have to switch on to, okay, reading as someone who has to prepare a lesson plan, for example, of Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. So what keywords am I looking for? And I'm going to obviously be toggling back and forth between my engagement on the page, the words and the eyes, and then having to go to the margins to make little notes to myself.
Right.
And one of my latest annotation systems is I'm putting the pound sign in areas of poems or essays or stories that I want to go back and revisit for either profound questions and discussions I can explore with my students, or if I'm working on an interview, something that I'm going to zero in on. So, I mean, I've
Interesting.
used stars in the past, I've used exclamation points, I've used OMF in the past, like the all sorts of acronyms. And but I think right now it's going to be like a pound sign summer. If I could make a prediction on June 1st, 2025. And I have an easier time. So yes, with reading, there are different ways that John interacts with these books. But when I'm drafting my poems, it's I kind of have an easier mode of getting into this technology-based mindset with my poetry.
Mhm.
And that means that ecology is sometimes my Achilles hurdle. Yet there is this very organic and inorganic balance that is struck throughout Park. And I keep going back to section 9, the opening, deliciously soporific rainwater pours from the hole where a branch used to be. Jetpack vacuum leaf blower strolling past mushroom caps, tiny cream-colored pancakes between trash and recycling can. So how is Park a reconciling of nature and the machine infused?
Yeah, that was another question that I just kind of went back and forth on. Excuse me. The first two were so they're like a page worth of inarticulate babble, and then the second one was pretty much the same. But I, I guess I could just say that by writing these poems, just like taking taking the time to just really see what was in front of me. Like, so for example, you're walking through your neighborhood. You might not necessarily see every single piece of text that's on a garbage can or on a uh, you know box of recycling that's on the sidewalk. But when you start to notice those things, you just start thinking about how um, well, I started thinking about how all of this stuff, all of this physical uh, stuff that's in front of us all comes from the same place, right? Like you, me, my cat, that garbage can, right? That that garbage can is made of metal, right? The metal comes from somewhere, it comes from beneath our feet, right? Well, what is my foot made of? Well, it's made from the same thing that bird skull over there is made from, right? Like the DNA ladder of squirrels, right? They're touching their paws to a tree, which is made of carbon, which is what their feet are made of. And just like thinking like that, you just start to realize that I mean, yeah, there's a separation between the natural and unnatural, but it's just one of those things that kind of struck me, and I couldn't really let it go. Like it was something that I needed to like intellectually explore, but
Mhm.
also just kind of feel as I walked through my environment.
Yeah, and it was interesting you talk about those squirrels. I remember you have that fact in the collection about the squirrels. I guess they can rotate their
Oh
ankles, so
yeah,
180, which is very
yeah.
mind-blowing. And I think the one adverb that is so true to form, if I were to get on an adverb soapbox, is squirrely, because that's all squirrels are capable of doing. That's all they can be, is squirrely. I can never think like a dog is loyal, a dog is
Mhm.
loving, a cat is. I don't have a cat, but I guess you can probably think of a number of adjectives and adverbs. But all I can think of with squirrels is just squirrely.
Mm-hmm.
But you actually gave some depth to the squirrel, and they made it this multifaceted creature that's not
Yeah,
just squirreling around. And maybe this. Mhm.
that's the other thing. Like I'm glad that you said that because I I originally wasn't going to have people in it at all. Um, it's the squirrels were the big thing, like that. That's what I saw everywhere, and I wanted to. This just sounds silly saying it out loud, but maybe not. I wanted to give the squirrels some dignity, right? Like
They need it, trust
see
me.
squirrels everywhere in the park. You're like, oh yeah, oh that's a squirrel. It's a rodent. You might give me rabies or whatever. But that squirrel is out there living its best life, and
Mhm.
that squirrel life is just as important as yours or mine. And that was the other thing that just kind of struck me. I don't know if you knew, but there was one mention of a blue face mask in there. Like I started writing it in the early summer of 2020, and I mean I wasn't too thrilled with people at that time, and
Mhm.
I didn't particularly want to write about them. I'd had all I could handle of people, and that was one of the big things about writing the book, actually. Like I just overwhelming anxiety and just feeling really awful about the way things are going, and
Mhm.
that was the impetus that I just wanted to be alone, just be with nature, and like the talking about the sky spinning and the feeling the grass and stuff. Like that was me just literally trying to find my grip, you know. So
Definitely, and I can relate to that. I was not dreading lockdown and isolation. It was because I had just finished up a PhD program. I was just literally needed some downtime, and I just used that. I actually dove into several interview pieces for University of Arizona's 1508 Poetry Center, their blog, and just
okay.
so I just use it as a time to just keep filling and reading for pleasure, not reading as teacher, John. And maybe maybe this harkens a little bit back to this idea of the organic and the inorganic and how so my when I was in Mississippi, I had one apartment that had they don't call them floods down there, they call them water events. So one apartment had a water event where it was from the carpet and it got soaked and icky and never want to have that experience again. But then in the one of the pandemic nights, the roof had started to have its water event. And for some reason, it didn't send me into a tailspin as if it had been maybe during a non-pandemic day, because during a non-pandemic time, it was just, okay, this is just rainwater seeping through. Lord knows I've stocked up on enough sort of towels and paper towels to take care of this leaking issue. And and for some reason, this is just water, and just think of it as condensation with an attitude. And it'll just maybe at the very worst, you'll lose some sleep over it, and then you'll have it later. You'll get up in the morning, and you'll have to record one of your online asynchronous lectures. But then you have the rest of the day to read and draft, and maybe throw a few more bounty paper towels at the problem, and then just go about and find the bliss of not having to be ensconced in Peopleville 24/7. And just sometimes you just need that bounty moment to yourself with the old water event on the roof.
Yep. It's
So speaking of water and rain, which leads to a rainbow, we are going to go to section 22 in its entirety because it has rainbow of multicolored metal barrels, wind whistling through that hole near the top of that bright green one. Duck blind graffiti, giant heart head, Betty Boop, heart eyes, little bow mouth, Beaver Dam, blue Pacific Basin boats, and ducks all facing toward lower Passaic River and Newark Bay and the turning hedges. What are the benefits of poets thinking like graffiti artists?
Yeah, that was another head scratcher question. I had to really um under that one. I don't know. I guess you could take it back to the textual question. So, talking about noticing every uh every recycling box, noticing every, park sign. Um, sometimes you just, uh, sometimes you need to put something where it's unexpected. Um,
Mm.
there were other things in that duck blind that I didn't mention just because, um, like for the flow of that section, it didn't quite fit. So it was a quote from John Muir. I
Mm.
cannot remember the quote right now, but it was a quote about nature. And I was like, oh my God, it like seeing it in that duck blind in the middle of this wetlands preserve, it just kind of it struck me. And having seen that text in that space at that moment was just exactly what I needed, right? And I went off and wrote about an egret or something, but I didn't put the quote in there. And I don't know, it's one of those creative choices. But yeah, I think that, or maybe taking a non-nature example, like but maybe like 10 years ago they had the poetry on the subway
Mm.
thing out here, and yeah, or like you'd be traveling through, I don't know, the West Village, and you'd see like in your car there's a poem about a leaf or something, and it just kind of gives you that weird juxtaposition. So yeah, I think there's definitely, no pun intended, space for poets to be graffiti artists. Um,
And
as
I
well.
guess one of the things that I'm always interested about with the New Jersey, New York area, and I guess the compression of it. So I would imagine probably a vibrant graffiti scene as opposed, I mean, the Midwest. I can't really think of anything vibrant graffiti wise that I've seen in a while. And probably the most memorable graffiti I've seen would have been on trains in Mississippi and just the way that people tag and the artwork that goes in there. I'm also always intrigued by how people can get graffiti on those overpasses. Maybe someone holds
I
them by
know.
their feet or their legs as they do the upside down graffiti, because I don't know of anybody sneaking out with 30-foot ladders in the middle of the night to just tag the overpass. But it would
Right.
be interesting to. So the vibrant graffitiness is where I'm headed. And are there any other vibrant graffiti aspects that you've seen lately that just you want to write a poem about? Or
Kind of. Well, it's not graffiti, but there's some murals here in Bayonne, New Jersey, where I actually live. Um, I live in New Jersey, but I travel to New York City for fun, etc. Um, but we lived in Queens for a long time, so I feel like I can call myself a New Yorker. But anyway, here in Bayonne, there's all sorts of murals and stuff. There's one of Yoda. There's a mural of a rescue dog. It's just weird, random stuff. And they have like public art installations and stuff. So yeah, I've definitely thought about it. Doing something close to home.
Yoda graffiti,
Yoda,
that takes the cake.
like you,
Coming
you wouldn't expect it.
from the spray can it comes to speak in that Yoda backward syntax. All right. So now we get to the heart of originally this interview series started. I think we're on our fifth year of it going. I think I was the first one, maybe July of 2020. And
Oh wow.
at the very core of the interview series at One Week Critique, this idea of looking at an early draft of a piece and then in its publication form. So I have, and through the magic of the shared screen, section 24 as you had drafted it, and then section 24 as you had revised it. So I'm going to just call it up here, get the old,
Sure.
and it's interesting, it's called section 28 as a draft, but you can tell us a little bit more about that process. But if you could read 28 as the draft, and then we'll get
Sure.
into the revision process of how 28 is now appearing in the book and as 24. So
Well, as a musician, you'll appreciate this original version. All right. I spy paper on the ground. Upon closer inspection, sheet music, chewed perfectly triangular with chewed notes and lyrics scattered. Look long enough. You can't tell where the notes end and the chewing begins. Leaf, half note. Grass, looking at the black ovals. Mr. McCollum's class at Gladys Wood, learning notation. Bing, bing, bong. AAC on the xylophone, keying and strumming the auto harp. AAC, thrum, thrum, thirp. Vera shaka, dormez-vous. Morning bells are ringing, ding dong, ding. Making the little flats and the quarter and halves, remembering my clefs and staffs, I spot the upside down black hat, the whole rest off near the curb, almost resting along the footpath.
All right. Good old Frere Jacques.
Yeah, right?
Let's get to the
It brings
revised.
it right back.
Yeah. Okay, so here we have now Josh Final of 28 as a JPEG.
Hey, all right. So, new version. Hmm. I spy paper on the ground. Upon closer inspection, sheet music. Chewed perfectly triangular with chewed notes and lyrics scattered. Look long enough and you can't tell where the notes end and the chewing begins. Leaf, half note, grass, looking at the black ovals. Notation, bing, bing, bong. Little flags on the quarter and halves, clefs and staffs. I spot the upside down black hat. Whole rest, off near the curb, almost resting along the footpath.
Nice. So how about the journey we take from xylophones and dormez-vousing to how it currently exists?
Um, the other one was too much. Um, too much explaining. Too much, just too much. Too is cluttered. Um, Mr. McCollum wasn't going to make another appearance. I didn't have anything particularly to say about him in the grand scheme of the book. Um, you don't need a song to give that impression of music. All right. And it's just
Mhm.
like, ooh, look how clever I am. It's a note, but it's a hat, but it's not. No. No, it's just get rid of it. And also the form, it wasn't what it was supposed to be. Right.
Mhm.
Verbally, you speak it aloud, you can hear it, it's just clunky. So just get rid of it.
And what's interesting about the revision is it does reiterate that idea of sparseness and taking a pestle to it, and the
Yeah.
way you can get that nice little sections of how you're lineating it and that columnar aspect to it. And then you had said earlier that so it's labeled 28 in the drafts, but it's ultimately it settles on 24 in the book. And it's
Yeah.
just, maybe this speaks more to how you earlier was saying that it doesn't, when you read a book, it's just a poem or two here or there. And was that kind of the process of how then all of these numbering details came about, the numeric system?
Yeah. I mean, I'd always kind of well, so I hate to use the word compose because it just sounds pretentious, but I composed them on my phone. And that just kind of dictated how long they were going to be, like line wise. And it's funny too, because Jack Kerouac did that. Like he said that about his some of his haiku, that like the size of the notebook was, dictated the size of the poem. So I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, I didn't number them. I just had an X. So it was like X period, and then you start. Um, but kind of like I was saying earlier, I try to go by flow. Like how did it all flow together? And the only stipulation was, I had to include that arch at the beginning. Um, yeah. But I ended up including the arch at the end too, which was I didn't plan on doing, so it just kind of was a bookend, you know.
Hmm. Arch end, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, speaking of images, one of my favorite in this collection is the 1950s Alien Eye lampposts. I mean, I'm about as sci-fi as it gets.
Yeah.
I grew up in that my television in the 80s. Remember that miniseries?
I loved V.
Right? The whoosh, and
Yeah.
the little they talk with three different voices, and then you
Wizard
figure out they're
baby.
here for the water and they're here for the people, and not in the best way.
Yep.
and
Ah,
even the cartoons, reruns of Challenge of the Super Friends. So
nice.
you had me at Alien Eye Lamppost in 1950. So I'm going to just maybe I'll reread this another tonight again, just for the sake of that lamppost. And that's in section 18, and that precedes your repeated phrase on the weathered boardwalk gazebo. Is
Oh yeah.
this gazebo a place you frequently visit? And then, all told, how much of Park, now that we heard a little bit about your phone drafting process, how much of this was drafted outdoors versus just sitting at a desk on the inside?
Yeah, that well, with the gazebo, it was it, it's like the corner of the, well, it's actually two parks. There was the main park, and then that gazebo area, that's where it kind of turns. That's where you kind of turn and you're walking along the Newark Bay, right? So it's a boardwalk. But the gazebo is like a little high point, and kids will have like their boom boxes and be dancing or whatever. There'll be kids like doing old bike tricks and stuff. Um, but yeah, we would go there. We would go onto there, and our dogs would like sniff around. Wait, what was this? Oh yeah, yeah. So that's the like little turning point to walk along the bay. But then if you go another way off to the right, there's like a little nature trail.
Hmm.
Uh, it's like a nature trail on one side, and then the boardwalk continues down to there's like ducks or swans or whatever. But you kind of have to see it, but it all connects. It all
Mhm.
connects back up. But anyway, um, yeah, the uh wait, what was the second half of your question?
So how much, when, so
Oh
you've
yeah.
been drafting this at the phone, was a lot of
Yeah.
this as you were walking outdoors, or were there just some moments where you're just, okay, I'm hunkering down, I'm at the desk, and I'm just, here's what I'm drafting today.
So it, it was all just based on the inspiration. Like if I would well, first of all, I would always go by myself.
Hmm.
Um I I didn't, it's not that I didn't want my wife with me, because like we would always, still go walking um with each other, but I just needed that time. And like I couldn't
Hmm.
have the dogs. So I would kind of like, if the dog was in the poem, I would just make it up, or if she was in the poem, I would just make it up. But they were all written by me on my phone as I was
Hmm.
walking through. I didn't write any of them when I wasn't there, you know.
Hmm.
But like then I would go back and just kind of, I'm not a big tinkerer. I obviously I believe in editing, but I'm not the kind of person who just goes back and messes with something that I feel is done. You know what I mean? So I might have like 30 poems in a pile. You're like, all right, I got these 30 poems. I know I'm not done with the book, but I'm just gonna sit down and craft these 30 lumps of poo into 30 great poems.
Hmm.
So yeah. But then like what once the whole thing was in front of me, I was like, all right, like I don't need to go out to the park anymore. Like these are all that are gonna be. And there was like 120 um at the end. But then I finally whittled it down to however many it was.
Hmm.
One. But
Yeah.
yeah, some of them just weren't very good. Or I repeated myself. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, I captured the eagleness of this eagle in this poem, so I don't need these other ones.
That is a cool phrase, the eagleness of that eagle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, in section 67, it's a six-line tableau, and it just blew me away, and I'm going to read it in its entirety. A shopping cart lies on its side, fading rock salt ring around it, chalk outline, across from the lot, bursting with chickenweed and dandelion. And why I was so fascinated with this tableau is at the height of my contamination phobias and probably up there with the pandemic worries, shopping carts were always ground zero, so much so that at grocery runs, I would only put what my arms could carry, and I would always politely
Uh,
decline what the assistants would offer me to go and grab a cart for me. So this section, it's beautified and elegized what would give my fears the inch that progressed to miles, and dandelion cushioning and all. And it speaks to the larger point of these everyday objects. There are some basketballs in the collection. There's like the little statue of a saint at one point that we
yeah.
see. There's that ambulance and the face masks. So what everyday objects in park were the most gratifying to write about? And this is as a sidebar, if you could also talk a little bit about that mosaic astroturf
Oh,
in
yeah.
section 23, but I love the objects that we come through, we weave through this world of nature and objects, whether they're the organic objects or the inorganic objects.
Yeah. Oh, I want to touch on the shopping cart thing though, because you said something and I didn't even realize it. You're talking about, in being in the middle of the pandemic and germs, and I like I hadn't even considered that. But w when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, haha, that's really funny. That the shopping cart is lying on its side, right? And the salt ring, I was like, oh Jesus, that's a chalk outline. The shopping cart is dead, which is
Mm,
so absurd. And it like kind of made me chuckle. And then I was like, oh wow, those dandelions and chickweeds, they're like going crazy. And again, the juxtaposition, I was like, wow, there's a dead shopping cart, and then these, quote unquote weeds are just going crazy, like as they should. That's what they do, right?
mhm,
And to me, that was the flowers, the weeds were beautiful, and I don't know, the shopping cart just kind of made me chuckle in that way, and I hadn't even connected it with germs, um,
mhm.
but yeah,
Yeah, I just remember people, they were just wiping down their shopping carts, front, left,
yeah,
forwards, and center. And some people were shopping with gloves. And I will admit there were times when I would go out double or triple mask just to be on the safe and the safest of all sides when I would do my
yeah,
grocery runs in Mississippi. And I I mean, the pandemic may have been on, but I was not going to give it my person-to-person interactions at the deli to get my pound and a half of sliced turkey meat set on maybe slicer number 8, if I recall. But it's just there'd be so many people who, again, you still would keep your distance, but you still need your sliced turkey meat.
dude,
But I just was not going to be the one, and I think it would sort of defeat the purpose because then you'd have all that kind of weird antibacterial, microbial, soapy stuff on your hands, which are then touching your produce, and but that
yep.
could go down a pandemic rabbit hole. But all this is to say, the shopping cart, it was just a fascinating trip down a memory lane for me of that where were we 5 years ago today?
Well, excuse me, I remember standing outside of Whole Foods. We had one here in Melbourne, New Jersey, which is right nearby. Like it was just a line of people out the door because you could only have like 100 people inside or whatever. So, one person would come out, one person would go in, and it was just wild. It was, yeah, it or like uh there was like a run on canned food. I was just like, jeez.
Oh, I stocked up, and then but I made the mistake of buying the kind of tuna that came with oil and not the
Oh,
best. Mm.
I'm so sorry.
Yep, we did what we had to do, right? Back in the day. But I was just wondering also, where exactly is this mosaic astroturf?
Yeah. So, there was a really, really cool effect one evening. And if you look at the part that talks about golden chocolate leaves, um, and then another one of the guy, um, it was like a mirror reflection in a puddle of umbrellas opening the wrong way and like
Hmm.
trees. Um, anyway, it was a really rainy night, and it was just kind of magical. right? The light was just right on those alien eye lampposts, and the moon was just at a certain angle. It was just kind of like really like kind of cinematic.
Mhm.
But the mosaic astroturf was our dog park. They
Oh.
someone thought it was a great idea to get rid of the rocks and the dirt and everything that was in there and put astroturf because I guess they thought it would be easier to clean, but it just stinks. It's just
Mm.
I don't get it. But anyway, there were leaves that were on the astroturf and the shadow of the leaves and the moon and the rain was playing in just such a way that it was like this calico pattern up and down the dog park. And I was like, oh crap.
Mm.
It was
Interesting.
pretty awesome. Yeah.
And I'm always curious because as someone who's not a pet owner, I mean, and you hear all these anecdotes about the fact that when people were staying home and pets were now with their humans 24/7, did you have that noticeable difference in the pet behaviors?
Oh, yeah. They kind of got well, my wife's been working from home through that and since then, but yeah, it kind of got, I don't know, it was really nice to be around them all the time. And
Mm,
they're kind of like, oh, where'd you go?
yeah. Well, speaking of work, my first paycheck when I was 15 years old came from writing program notes for Kalamazoo Junior Symphony Orchestra. And what I remember more and I'm thinking back to those, it must have been probably some of the most cliche writing I've ever done. I call it a buffet of cliches, clean plate club style. I think I used blazing to the finale, right? Who hasn't used that
Mhm.
before? But I mostly remember that my quote unquote supervisor, her name was Lee Fletcher. And this was during the Murder She Wrote 90s. And I'm always going back to my Angela Lansbury place when I think of those years. And it's on reruns now. And there's even one channel on Roku where you can get Murder She Wrote at all hours of the day. Now,
My
speaking of
mother-in-law would be
youth,
very happy.
yeah, it's the best. Your website mentions that you began publishing poetry first in your late teens, and then you moved swiftly into music writing. So, if you could discuss your early music-centered projects and the bands who were formative influences, my pre-driver's license self would be most grateful.
Sure. Yeah. So I always kind of knew that I wanted to be a writer. Um, I know that wasn't your direct question, but I will get there. Yeah, so like when I was in high school, I uh my senior year, I don't know, everything just kind of clicked for me. Like I knew that I wanted to um do something with writing, but I wasn't totally sure. I took a broadcasting class, TV radio broadcasting, for the last half of my senior year, and I um made friends with these uh kids from sorry, so it was a like a voc ed school. They sent us across town next to the university, and it was kids from these different high schools around Anchorage. And I befriended this guy, and we started playing music together. And he kind of was like my entry into local music. Um, so this 1991. Um, yeah, so I was playing music with my friend Steve. Um, and I just started to, oh, I saw a tape of this band at our local record store. I was like, geez, I didn't know that you could I didn't know you could make a tape and put your music on it and sell it at the record store. Shit.
Hmm.
And then I just started, meeting more people, and I found these like underground rock clubs in Anchorage,
Hmm.
and I would go, with my best friend at the time, and he and I were just like huge music freaks. Um, and I was like, wow, oh, like I could do something with music, I could do something with writing, and this like by this point I like just graduated high school, and I found out that we had a radio station at our college. It was like the first year that it was on. Um, the spring of 1992, we like debuted in like FM. Um, uh, what do you call it? Like the station was only like university wide, so it was like unless you lived like within a mile of the school, you couldn't get it. But in February '92, we just kind of exploded and went like uh citywide, statewide, like you could get it anywhere. And that was just kind of my introduction to like our local music scene, right? And so I started uh like I had a DJ shift. So you asked about music, we would play everything like The Cure and Sisters of Mercy, Susie and the Banshees, REM, freaking any replacements, like anything, all of it. It was just like soaking it up like a sponge, you
Mm.
know. Like I've been into all that stuff in school, like when I was in, sophomore, junior, senior in school, but like it was like, all right, now I'm an adult, like I'm in it, and like just meeting all these crazy like musician people, and the next obvious thing to do after having a radio show is to do a zine, right? So that's what we did. I got a couple of friends of mine and I together, and we wanted to write about local music. Like that's just all we wanted to do. Like there were people that were, you know, working for a newspaper and writing about theater or news, but I, that just wasn't my scene at the time. Like I was going for a journalism degree, but like the music was the thing I really wanted to do. So we um we would just go to all these local shows and we just have a tape recorder and uh you know notebook and just like write a little review and print it up, and again we would sell it at the local record store, back when those existed, or at the independent bookstore. And eventually the word just got around that there are these kids writing about, the music scene, and we all just kind of met each other. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It was it was a really
Viral before viral.
yeah. Well, and it's funny because I was talking to a friend of mine from those times um j just recently, and he was like, yeah, Anchorage was it was really like real dirty, like not a lot of excitement, like not a lot of things to do for young people at the
Mm.
time. But it was kind of a blessing in disguise, right? Because we made our own fun. Like we, you know, got a band together. Like if you want to go and play music, you do it. Like you get a
Mm.
couple of friends and you go do it, right? Oh, you want to read about local music? Here you go. I wrote this, and
Mhm.
eventually, the weekly paper like found out about it, and our daily newspaper found out about it. A couple of years go by, and then we're writing for the newspaper. And it was really cool.
Did you have a lot of bands that would come up on tour that made Alaska part of their touring stops?
Yeah, like we'd have like just keeping with the like the independent thing, like we'd have, God help us, we had there's really no polite way to say it, but just like shitty country.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Michiganders.
Oh,
Um,
so
if you're in,
probably not even Billy Ray Cyrus level. If I remember, in '92 was his achy breaky heart year, so probably the lesser than Billy's.
yeah, well, like people like him would come up, or Alan Jackson, if you remember from the early '90s, or like Foreigner. Just again, if that's your thing, I'm not gonna poo-poo it.
So ironically, they're singing "Hot Blooded" when it's probably what negative some
Right,
degrees or right.
right. Um, so we would get that kind of stuff, like
Mhm.
classic rock bands that were unfortunately past their prime, or like
Mm.
modern country stuff, and just kind of like there's always been a huge folk music scene in Alaska, which I love. But rock wise, we would get like scrappy bands from Seattle or Portland or San Francisco, like lots of West Coast, and everybody would just come up. Um, like no one that made it past like, the underground or like
Mm,
college radio, but
mhm,
um, yeah, we would get all sorts of you know big-ish bands from the Pacific Northwest.
mhm. Any Canadian bands? I'm thinking Glass Tiger Reunion, maybe.
No, we had DOA. DOA
Oh,
came. That was fantastic. Do you know them?
mhm. I don't so much.
Like a hardcore punk rock from Vancouver.
Hmm.
Yeah.
See, my 91, 92 would have been very steeped in classical music, would have been, I did have someone that made me the Nirvana Bleach album. They dubbed it nicely onto a tape for
Mhm.
me, and
As you do.
but I would have still been maybe just at the tail end of a Def Leppard phase,
Hmm.
and again, when I had a paycheck in the summer of 2001 from a job that was it's probably a job I should have had years before then, but it was just like a fast food type of gig. And
Hmm.
what I did with that is I actually bought the first three Def Leppard CDs because I sort of am ashamed of my hysteria phase with the Def Leppard. It's now I need to have some of that high
I
and
mean,
dry on through the night and pyromania. I mean, I think that's for me my little Def Leppard Bible there. But I do like Hysteria, the song. I do like Armageddon. I run from Pour Some Sugar on Me. It's just I can't. I mean, but that's the one that sells the crowds. That's why people still. We don't have Ticketmaster anymore, but I guess that's when people still get onto their however they buy their tickets. They want to hear that one. I'm just no. Let's hear the stuff from way back when they were just at the cusp. And even they had a song on some of their when they would release it in their home country that some of those songs wouldn't make it over here, like "Me and My Wine," which you can actually see a video of it on YouTube, and but it wasn't on the High and Dry album when it came to the States. So our loss, but you can find it on
you are a
YouTube.
connoisseur,
Mhm. Oh yeah,
and you
definitely.
don't
My
want
sister
to
made me a
deny
Def
it.
Leppard bumper sticker.
And that's the thing. Like you know those early albums, so
Mhm.
that's good.
When Pete Willis was still part of the guitar lineup. So
When everybody
that's
had their arms. Yeah.
oh goodness, yeah, that was I remember that Animal. Okay, I will say Animal from Hysteria. I will say that's vaulted into my maybe top three Def Leppard songs, but we will ignore Love Bites, we will ignore Pour Some Sugar on Me and
Oh, that's good stuff. I um I almost got to see them on that Hysteria tour because they were one of the people in 1987 that I really wanted to see. Sorry, my cat's going to do something bad. But yeah, I didn't have enough allowance money. At
Mhm. Well,
I saw Bon
um
Jovi on the Slippery When Wet tour.
wow,
That was pretty
cool.
fantastic.
So now we go from the 80s, we go from 1987 all the way to 2025 because we're going to say congratulations on the release of your chapbook, 10 Crass Poems.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, sure. It's also Alien Buddha Press. And
Yes.
the first poem statement, there are new windows to look out from, And then I'm pairing that with this phrase from Carl Phillips' 2024 collection, Scattered Snows to the North, where he writes about flourishing differently. So those two ideas are in my head a lot lately when I'm thinking about how to reframe where I see myself in the poetry conversation these days. And gosh knows, I have been needing some new windows to look out from for the longest time. And so I've got those new windows, I've got that flourishing differently, and that alien eye lamppost, because we all need more of those in our lives. So thank you for that encouragement from those words. What has your collaboration process with Alien Buddha Press been like for these three projects?
It's been great. They're very helpful and professional. And it's kind of strange that I would have to say that, but you'd really be surprised. Just the unprofessional attitude of some literary magazines,
Mm,
small presses.
mm.
But
But that's
anyway,
cool
yeah,
that you've
I'm very
found
happy.
such a great simpatico of ideas, and that
Yeah.
they've been
Well,
championing you for these. Because I think your first release, so with Cacophony, and Was it kind of like you came to them with this idea? Because I do have ta-da or da 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 right here.
Hey,
Yep, with there's the Lovecraftian aspect to it, right?
yeah,
So did you come to them and say, I have this Lovecraftian idea of poetry, poetics, a poetics of Lovecraftianness, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so the query elements of like, or did you just say, here's this collection I have, or how did that come to exist?
Um, uh, I don't remember it. Red, if you're listening to this or watching this, you could correct me. I'm fairly sure that I had written the whole thing and just took it to them and was like, "Hey, what do you think?" Because I, yeah, because it kind of came in fits and starts. It's
Mhm,
a long, possibly boring conversation I don't want to get into, but it was, yeah, I had it as a full concept in my head, and I had to, excuse me, make sure that the whole thing was, you know, solidified before I
mhm,
showed it to him. But um, yeah, they have a really interesting model for publication, which I hadn't even considered before. So they do print on demand, but there's so they you know uh they have like a regular submission process like any literary magazine or small press, and they like you submit to them, they give you the thumb up or thumbs down, or oh, maybe you could try this and submit again. But like once they have it, they they have a couple of different platforms. So they have the Amazon KDP, they call it. I don't remember what it stands for, but it's their print on demand service. And the other one is lulu.com.
mhm,
Um, so you can, excuse me, you can get it, as many books as you like as a publisher, you can get as many books as you need, right?
mhm,
So
mhm,
someone orders 5 books, okay, there's 5 books. So you don't have boxes and boxes of stock sitting around,
mhm,
not making you any money, which I thought was really cool because you can take more chances on more people, right?
mhm. Nice.
It's like, wow, that really makes a lot of sense. And
Mhm,
the upshot is it looks really good. Like you know how you might see a self-published book and the cover is just like like they maybe they should have spent a little bit more time on the design or font. Like these books that they do look really nice, and
mhm.
the size is
Yeah.
perfect.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a little crease on the, like,
Yep.
yeah, I don't know. It's just little things like that.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. It's got that new book feel too, right? The definitely. And you've got the ripple, you got the birds. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. My friend Irene did that cover. It was a real hit. Like that's the thing that everybody was talking about, and I was
Yeah,
like, oh,
it's not it's tranquil. Water is we need more pure water, right, in our lives.
yes.
And now that bottled water is just getting all of the like the no, 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 bottled water, bad, bad, bad. So
Oh,
this
don't even get me
just
started on microplastics. Jeez.
so just the reservoir aspect and just here and aquifer is one of my favorite words of all time. So I gotta throw aquifer out there. And
Hope I put that in there.
it's I do want to say just thank you so much, Josh, for your time today and our the conversation. It was a reward and reminder, especially when I think about observational poetics that can literally lead from kernel to collection as we hear how the story of Park came to be with these walks and the cell phone aspect, and we heard about duck blinds and astroturf that's mosaic and deceased shopping carts and the weeds that are doing what weeds do. They beautify this this husk of commerce, right? And I was just wondering if you could close out by reading the last section of Park and then share your perspective on the value in knowing 32 different words for sky.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I want to apologize in advance to all of the languages that are in here. I'm about to butcher all of them. So, all right. So here we go. Mm, oh, yeah. Oh, and if I may, if I might, number 83, right before it, slowly making my way to the ground, blue sky spinning. That's what I was talking about with the anxiety.
Hmm.
So if you like this
Oh
whole
yeah, do the like the rock star tour of 83 and 84.
sure.
Great years for Def Leppard too, by the way.
Well, so this again, I didn't plan it like this, but it just kind of worked out that way. The last part and the next to last part kind of make it a little experience, a little panic attack experience,
Hmm.
right? So it's the end finds me a dream, the beginning finds me a dream, and everything else in the middle is just working through the anxiety, right? Like
Hmm.
working my way through the park to find that kernel of peace, you know.
Hmm.
All right, so the last one. Chicken foot walking paths out from the underbridge by the duck pond on that shaking tree, crumbly moss pesto on bark falls to the park floor. As a caramel hawk graces the treetop, takes to the sky, out to Greenville and Journal Square, sweeping over to Manhattan and back to Weehawken, Hudson Valley, into the sky. The Akash, Akasa, Akasam, Asman, Aspan, Kalem, Cielo, Selu, Sel, Ciel, Theo, Kiel, Himmel, Himmel, Himmen, Himmelin, Hanul, Lug, Langit, Leni, Lenitra, Niba, Nibe, Nibo, Oranos, Samai, Sama, Sema, Sikaya, Ciel, Spear, Sukai.
32 of them, and
Yeah.
there's this string of sky text, which
Yep.
is quite a profound way to end. So how did it
Yeah.
come that you curated these different words for sky, and how does that overall just contribute to, I guess, the aesthetic of Park, and I guess the value in knowing 32 different words for sky as artist, as mentor to your students, as someone who's making these poetic pieces that are observations about nature, and especially that we learned that these were coming to you with the literally almost 5 years ago to the day in that
Yeah.
2020 aspect.
Oh, yeah, that's a trip. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any intrinsic value in knowing that many words for the sky, but um, in this context, um, it was just kind of like, oh, okay. Well, first of all, it was one of those things I had written with no home, right? It was just a poem that was lying around. It's like, what the hell am I going to do with 35 words for sky? And I was like, oh shit. And it just kind of like bing, the light bulb just kind of went off.
Mhm.
It's like obviously that's what I'm gonna end this with. But it's you know, the caramel hawk doing what it does, flying all over the Hudson, around the North New Jersey area up to the Hudson Valley, and it's going to take off into the sky, right? It's my sky, it's your sky, right? Like I'm seeing the New Jersey sky, and you're seeing the Mitten in Michigan sky. The person in Japan is seeing the Sukai, right? The person in Germany is seeing the Himmelin. I think it was Germany, right? So we're all, you know, corny as it sounds, we're all living under the same sky.
Mhm.
We have different words to describe it, but it's still the same. It's the same thing, right? We're
Mhm.
experiencing our own version of reality, but it's more alike than it is different, you
Mhm.
know. And we have these feelings and experiences that we can't. I don't know. It's difficult to explain, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, that's what poetry does. It is the uniter and the
yeah,
binder.
one can
Yeah.
hope.
Mhm. All right. So Park, which came out in 2024. And
Yeah,
are there any new ideas on the horizon for you?
yeah. I kind of don't like to talk about
Okay.
that are in the works because I mean, not that I don't want to like jinx it
Mhm.
or like take the energy out of it, but I'm working on a thing about so back 100 years ago in 1915 and 16, there was a series of labor strikes here in Bayonne. Um, and kind of going along with this park idea, I was like, oh, explored part of our nature here in northern New Jersey. So now I want to explore my town, you know. Like I spent so many years writing about Alaska, but I'm like, yes, I'm from Alaska, but I don't live there anymore. I need to start exploring New Jersey, and working people are important to New Jersey, to me, and the history of the place I live in. So that I was like, that's it. Like I'm gonna write
Mhm.
about this, labor strike, these oil workers strike.
Hmm.
I've
Yes.
been researching that, like researching with emailing with different people around Jersey and trying to get, contact Western Connecticut University for these sheaf of papers and
Oh,
like
archival work, the
yeah,
best of the
like that.
best. Yes. And then
Yeah.
did I remember, I think I was on part of your website that wasn't there where you were doing some sort of an encyclopedia project a few years back or a
Yeah.
dictionary project. What was that consisting of?
Okay, so do you want the short version or the long version?
Sure, it'll be a nice wrapping up of the
Okay.
of our discussion.
So all of the uh, germs of these ideas came from that. Um, so like there were about 5 or 6 park poems in this encyclopedic project. I spent all sorts of time doing the cacophony poems in this encyclopedic project and the crafts poems. So Roland Green, the editor-in-chief of the Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics, uh, he um, was let me rewind it. That encyclopedia was my like poetry lifeline.
Hmm.
Uh, so up until 2014, I'd only written about 50 poems. Um, I had this weird idea that I was going to write, uh, write these amazing, wonderful poems. It was just going to like come right out of my brain onto the paper. And I spent many, many years just tweaking a bunch of garbage poems. And I was like, you know what? I need to sit down and really figure out how poetry works. Right? Like I need to know the terminology. I need to know the forms. I need to know the genre, the history. So I was like, shit, like what's the definitive encyclopedia? And like I'd seen this Princeton encyclopedia in all of my professors' uh, you know, offices. And I was like, I'm gonna sit down and read that thing. And I was like, wow, like not only am I gonna sit down and read this thing, I'm gonna write a poem every single day based out of this encyclopedia. So it started with Abecedarian, if I'm pronouncing that right, and ended with Zulu poetry. And it took me from was it July 5th, 2015 to August 9th, 2019. So like 4.5
Wow.
years. And when I say every day, I'm not kidding you.
Oh no, that's so
Just
Matthew
sitting down.
Schmidt, who's one of the founders of One Week Critique, he had a poem a day group, and I joined it. He, yeah, I think he started that during his MFA, maybe, or at the University of Arizona, or maybe mm, at the tail end of that, or maybe towards the beginning of his PhD. And I hopped in from, I think, on maybe the shortest day of the year of 2018, so December 21st, 2018, all the way up into September 2019, early September. I was doing that poem a day, and I it was just so cool because people would come in and come out of that project, and some people are still, maybe one or two people have still kept that going. And if you
Yep.
just think about the output that is generated, and that was just some of the most carefree that I have been in terms of I mean, yes, I still did the old clock, yeah, to maybe set it for about 24 minutes and say there was not maybe 4 minutes of my best work, but that was a solid 20 minutes. But even with that constraint, I think that's the most fun I've had in terms of just exploring ways to make new art.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like it's constraint, right?
Mhm.
This is something I had to find out the hard way because like I said, I spent many years just revising the same horrible work. And I had it in my head that I wanted to write short stories, but I wasn't good at it, but I hadn't found poetry yet.
Mhm.
It's just one of those things. Like you have to, you young people out there, you have to find your voice.
Mhm.
Teachers shaking their fists. You, you can't do it any other way, right? Like you have to be
Mhm.
authentically you. You have to write the
Mhm.
stuff that comes from you. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
A waste
So
of
that
time.
is, it was cool to get the background of that project because it's always interesting how people, again, how you're entering the world of constraints, but you're doing it in the hopes that there will be some liberating breakthrough that is just tailor-made just for you, dear writer, just for you, dear writer, just for
Yeah.
you, dear writer.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like you don't know. You don't know what's going to be when it goes down on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't know. It's you people get so hung up on trying to make the writing mean something when they haven't, how do I say it? Like they haven't let it breathe. Like they haven't let it be what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're going to write something and just a total piece of garbage, and that's okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
today. And
Yeah.
tomorrow you're going to write something and it's going to be hilarious, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
next day you're going to write something that's the most depressing thing you've ever written.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
And then you mine the little gems out of there, and that's
Yeah.
how you get your jewelry case.
Yep. Because
Uh,
you can't expect it to come all at once. And I again, risking sounding like an old fart. I think that's the problem that comes with being young. Like you expect it all right now, and when you don't get it, it's just soul crushing.
mhm. Mhm.
You have to practice that patience.
Yeah. As opposed to soul coughing, if I'm getting my bands right. Right.
Yes, you are.
All righty. Well, again, thank you so much, Josh.
Yeah,
I've appreciated
great.
this for your insights. And we did it. We had our park, I was not Park Avenue, but we had our park conversation, and it was wonderful to hear how this book came to being and of your ways of thinking about the nuances of what one can do when they're outdoors in nature. And it, even if it, and the dogs, it had me also with the dogs too. I mean,
Yeah, you gotta put the dogs in there.
yeah.
I even put other people's dogs in there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And this wraps up our 66th interview for One Week Critique. Thank you. I will hit stop.